Katsukian Network presents Humans Being with KIRK WHALUM.
I'm so glad to see you again. I can't see you, but I think I see you. Yeah, I see you. It's KIRK WHALUM, Humans Being with KIRK WHALUM. It's our podcast that we enjoy doing, but I'm just so happy that I can see you behind the wheel of that car. Or was that you? Yeah, you're at the desk at the house. Yes, I'm so happy to have you as my special guest today. And you and I have a very special guest coming up on this show. Oh, my goodness. Pastor Jamal Bryant, Dr. Jamal Bryant. Oh, if you're from Atlanta, I know you just about had a wreck just then. Don't do that. But man, I want to make sure that you tune in to all the great shows that are on this network, the Katsukian Network, Kudzu, right? Katsukian.com. And man, there's some awesome shows. And you can also touch us on social media. If you're on Instagram, it's Humans Being with KIRK. If you're on Facebook, it's Humans Being with KIRK WHALUM. How about we get on with this?
Humans Being with KIRK WHALUM.
Riffin' on jazz.
Mr. Chuck.
Yes, sir. Here we
doing,
are.
man?
Oh, man, I'm ready to get some history
Back
going
again.
on.
We got it. We got
This
it for
is
you.
it.
We got it for you. Today we're doing 8 eras of jazz.
Yes.
Riffin' on jazz on the Katsukian Network.
So this little segment we call That's a Word, and we have a lot of fun with it. And today's word is going to be one that you may or may not recognize. It is lu. It is agua. It is, let me see, in Japanese, I know this. It's mizu. Mizu. It is water. Water, as they say in Britain, water. In the place that I live, which is called, Memphis, Tennessee, which is a place of kings and queens, we kind of don't pronounce it like that. We kind of call it water. And so what I have been led to do is to choose whether or not I am going to go with the local pronunciation of that word. You may say, KIRK, this is not that big a deal. I'm sorry, but it has, it has implications to my desire to be a global citizen and yet to be rooted in my local environment. Someone very famous talked about that, bloom where you're planted. But I need to say that I made a choice a while back that, I can code switch, with the best of them. But I chose this one word where I said, I am going to decide how I pronounce the word. Okay, again, I speak Spanish, I speak French. I mess around with Japanese, truly do not speak it. I want to. That's coming up later. I need to shave off about 30 years of my life to go back to when I was 30, so then I can really, really learn Japanese. Anyway, the word water, I have decided that I'm not gonna say water. I want some water. Nope, I'm going to say water. When I'm talking and you say, just everything I understood, but then I look, he said something just then that sounded like he was from Britain, water. Yes, I have chosen to be just a little snobbish on that one word, water. If I'm not saying it like that, I'm going to be saying agua, de l'eau, as we say in French. But I'm just not going to say water. And so here's the thing. Can you be in a place? I mentioned that there were ramifications of this. This is not just semantics. Can you be in a place but not of it? In other words, can you abide and be helpful, be a blessing, but not adopt every single aspect of that place? Can you be in this place but still be connected to the larger world? Right. I guess that's really the main question. Can you be in this place, be plugged in the ways that you should be, not in every way, right? but in the ways you should be, but still be plugged into the greater context. And for me, as a traveling musician, I'm so blessed to be able to travel. And I've been all over the place. I haven't been to the Middle East. I haven't been down under. But other than that, and of course, I haven't been to Antarctica. But I have been a lot of places. And so I have decided, for instance, that, the language, I think it's probably 15 languages that use the word ciao. Of course, it's Italian. Ciao, which means hello and goodbye and okay and all of that, right? So when I say goodbye, I'm going to say ciao. Or in Spanish, they say, ciao, ciao. I'm just going to say that. And people say, well, isn't that kind of bougie? It's like, maybe so. But I don't look at it like that. Because again, I'm over here on Thursday mornings. I'm out here cutting hair with the brethren here, brethren who can't afford a haircut, either homeless or they're just, that the haircut is not in their purview economically, right? So, I mean, I figured there are ways that I'm plugging in that would preclude me being bougie, right? But I am going to decide, no, I get to decide how I greet you. And I'm going to greet you the way people in all these other languages greet you. They say ciao. And you say, well, I don't want to say, well, okay, that's fine. Or you can learn my word, our word, and we can be on the same wavelength. But here's the thing, water. I'm not going to say water. I want some water.
Humans Being with Kirk Whalum. Keeping it real, right, and funky.
This is a guy who obviously has disdain for women of color. He called a young woman at CNN stupid and said she asks a lot of stupid questions, and he doesn't hesitate to go there on a regular basis, and particularly with black women.
Funky Politics on the Kazukian Network.
Kazukian! My very special guest, that's right, you are my special guest on a little thing we call Humans Being with Kirk Whalum. And as usual, you and I have a very special guest, but I think today's special guest is a little more special than usual. If you don't believe me, ask a few people in Baltimore, ask a few people in Atlanta, ask a few people all over the doggone world. Would you please join me in welcoming our special guest, brother? Honestly, you said I couldn't call you. It's not Bishop. It's not. Can't do the cardinal thing. Just Jamal. Jamal Bryant.
It's on my driver's license. Thank you, sir.
Oh man! Speaking of driving, you have covered some miles in your journey, man. And of course, I'm speaking metaphorically. It's interesting, as a leader. You had to. I'm just, I'm reeling on the fact that I have known you for, over 30 years. But I'm thinking even further back than that. I'm just wondering about little Jamal. Did you have any clue about you have to be leading a bunch of people?
This is an exclusive for Human Being with Kirk Whalum. I've told this story nowhere to nobody at any time, and it's appropriate I tell it to Kirk. For 7 years, Kirk, I played the trumpet, and I really thought I was going to be a trumpeter. The first CD I ever got, I'm a preacher's kid, was Miles Davis' Bitches Brew, because as a pastor's son, that's the only way I could curse in the house was say the name of the album. So I played trumpet from 6th grade all the way up through high school. Mo Better Blues changed my life. I put a part in the center of my head. I started wearing black and white shoes, and I go to Morehouse. Kirk, it messes me all the way up because the only way I could play my instrument was to be in a marching band. And I was too cool for school. There was no way in the world I was going to be in the halftime show. So at Morehouse is where I gave up the trumpet. And I went into international studies because I followed the great jazz greats who all went to London and Paris and Germany. I thought, listen, let me just go into international studies because there's nowhere in the world I'm ever going into ministry.
Yeah.
So, fir-
Yeah.
yeah, first time I ever went in a club, it was a jazz club. It was not to party down. I was in a jazz club sitting in the back and really thought that was my life's journey. I, like many PKs, including our host, never saw myself in the pulpit. Uh, I really thought if I did anything, it was going to do somewhere in the orbit of civil rights and activism. So I knew I was a preacher, but never
Yeah.
saw myself as a pastor. So I saw in the lineage of Reverend Jesse Jackson, Reverend Al Sharpton, who were not pastors, but understood that they had a global responsibility. And so life has taken me really on a roller coaster. Everybody who has a life plan, tear it up and start over. Because whatever you thought you were going to do in 2020, the pandemic came and disrupted it. So one of those who can really say that your plan is really God's plan. So I've gone a whole lot of miles around the mulberry bush, Kurt, in the intention of following what I wanted.
Yes.
And anybody who's got a GPS knows that you can pass the light, pass the exit, and then the GPS will recalibrate to get you back to where you're supposed to be.
Touch
And so,
two or three people and say recalibrate.
yeah, so that's what life has done for me is it keep telling me go up another light and turn right so you can catch up to where you're supposed to be.
My.
And the amazing feat of God is humility is not a natural gifting for me. And so my successes are always the same size of my failures. And so everything that I have done wrong, God evens out the playing field by making it right. So I'm just appreciative of every turn. I got a lot of frequent flyer miles on an airplane called Grace. 'Cause I don't belong here, but I'm just appreciative.
I'm not promising as a preacher myself. I'm not promising I'm not going to preach a couple of the things you just said. I'm not promising that.
Take either, have all of it.
So in soccer, they have what they call an own goal, right? I'm a huge soccer fan. I am about to do an own goal for the opposite team. Now, so here's the thing. You and I met when you were well. I should let you tell the story. I mean, you just blew my mind this morning with this story, so I'm gonna ask you to share it with the public.
Yeah, so, and I want you all who are watching today to know that this is not scripted. Kirk is just getting this moments ago. I
Mind
lived,
blown.
I lived next door to Kirk's brother when I was in college. And when I found out that Kirk was Kevin's brother, I did not believe him. So he's like, my brother's coming to town. I said, man, you gotta let me meet him. You gotta let me meet him. Because for me, this was Michael Jordan coming to town. This is the closest I'm gonna get. And he made me an indentured servant for that lunch. But because I want to say Kevin was in the Glee Club, maybe. Was
Oh
he on
boy,
the?
yeah. Listen, with Dr. Wendell Whalum over the Glee Club and Kevin
Yeah.
Whalum at Morehouse, trust me, he was in the Glee Club.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
Lord.
so I really just begged them and prodded because this was my last stance of getting close to a jazz great. And so I'll never forget it. We went to this restaurant is now closed called Mix. Those of you who are from Atlanta, you should know it. Near downtown Atlanta. If you were a college student, all you had was Mix in Houston's. And
How
Kevin's big
about
brother
that?
came to town. You were doing a show somewhere in Atlanta,
Yeah.
and we saw you the day after that. And so that should have
Wow, that's
been
crazy.
1990, 1991. So from that day to this is our first time seeing each other.
Yeah,
So
that's crazy. So I take that back. I was like 30 at that time, but I will say, what you have done is jogged some stuff in me that is just insanely, like parallel in the sense that you are a PK, I'm a PK, and you said, man, the last thing I was ever going to do was to pastor anybody, or for that matter, for me, it was like even to say I'm a minister. That wasn't going to happen because my
right,
dad was larger than life. Reverend KT
absolutely,
Whalum, God rest his soul. And
yes,
and yet, when I came to that point, it was 91. Pastor Brian, it was
wow,
91 when I,
wow,
accepted the calling. It was the year I moved to Paris. Like we moved to Paris like 6 months after that. And I was touring with Whitney Houston, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, no way in the world I'm going to be a minister. And then God basically through when they talked about Mary, it's like, Jesus, I need you to do this thing. We're at this wedding. And Jesus like, I really am not trying to, be your concierge, and she said, well, she turned around to the people. She turned away from Jesus, the Son of God, and turned to the
mm,
people to serve. And she said, just whatever he says, do it. That was it. That
yeah,
was when I knew. I said, you need to just be you, boss. So whatever he says, do, just do it. Don't question it.
nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And so we had no idea that Mary wasn't talking to the catering staff. She was talking to Kirk and Jamal.
My.
Whatever
Whatever
he
he
tells you,
says, do.
that's what you got to do. Yeah.
And that's what you've done. And I guess the thing is that you know people are in such a state of need. I mean, whether it's Baltimore, Atlanta, or just go on and on and on, that we find ourselves now. At least I find myself going back. Like, what were you thinking? Like you lost time being in the will of God, like doing what He needed done. I mean, man, just touch on a couple of the things that you're doing right now. In the community. I mean, I'm going to go into liberation theology. I'm going to go into all the things that tie you to this work. But what are some of the things that you're doing there in
Yeah.
that
The
incredible?
Yeah, I want to say the pandemic helped me to be a pastor and not a preacher. See, the being a preacher is really the easiest part. It's what you do in the pulpit. Being a pastor is what you do after the benediction. A writer said, "You can't be a shepherd and not smell like sheep." And so, in this 15 months that we've been out of the church, I've been in the community. And God had to have ordained it because I'm in a new assignment here in Atlanta. I've been here 2 years. So I couldn't, Kirk, be somewhere in revival. I didn't have no preaching engagements. The world had
Uh-huh.
shut down. And so in this
I
year,
have no
we have,
gigs, so yeah, we're even.
yeah,
I s-
in this pandemic, we have given groceries to 700,000 families. And I'm there every Saturday when it is that they do it, touching and feeling and greeting the people because that is our responsibility. It helped me to understand and look at Christ different. Is that Jesus never ministered and then sat down and drank orange juice. When he finished preaching, he either healed somebody or fed somebody. And I think that's the missing integer of the present day church. It should run from the lower thirds for entertainment purposes only, because many of our churches are not equipping and empowering the community. And we've got a responsibility to do that.
Man, and I feel like I know I probably are going to close this segment, but let me just say that, when you and I, are in seminary, you went a whole lot longer than I did, but 'cause my seminary degree is about ministering out here in the marketplace. But one of the
Yeah,
first things that hit me was Mother Teresa, and she just
yeah,
worked me over. You know, she worked me over because there was no show. There was no Jesus show. Nobody was critiquing how she did what she did because she was in what she did was such a rebuke to
Yeah.
everything anyone would say, and that seems to be what I hear from you now.
It is an amazing thing that you would bring her up because the tension in the black community is a Mother Teresa conviction with a real preachers of LA environment. And so there is a sentiment in the community if the pastor has not taken a vow of poverty, then they're pimping the community. So outside of a bicycle, people want to know where you get that car from.
Right.
How you out there with a silk shirt on and the people are struggling. So it is that yin to yang of understanding my responsibility, my call, and what it is that God has put into my life. That the people expect you to be a community, to be in the community, but we've got so many preachers who want to be celebrity and not community. So they got more security than they got members. You like to
Wow.
preach, but don't like people. And so there's a disconnect that causes us to really understand that Jesus only felt compassion when he moved amongst the people, saw their poverty and saw their sickness. You really don't know what's going on in your congregation until you begin to dwell amongst them.
Pastor Dwight Andrews, Pastor, our new senator, your buddy, Raphael,
Yeah.
and yourself, and me to some extent, we were all at one point or another, we hit that juncture of liberation theology, the James Holmes and the others who made us realize that, wait a minute, you got the book in your hand, let's close it, and then let's open it back up, and let's see how that from Revelation from Genesis to Revelation, it is the story of liberation. It is the story of God liberating the underdog. I mean, man, I know you could speak on that, but how is it that, man, how do we fit that into where we are now? When I first read it was the 90s, right?
Yeah.
But here we are now in
Backdrop,
2021. And
yeah, in the backdrop of Black Lives Matter, liberation theology is not an elective. It is core curriculum for any ministry that wants to be relevant. I say this all the time, so those of you who hear me in the last year, you can cover your ears because you done heard this. We have to be involved, Kirk, and here's the reason. Black Lives Matter movement is the very first civil rights movement, drum roll, not birthed out of the church. The Black Lives Matter movement is the very first civil rights movement for black people since we hit these shores that is not led by a religious figure. And as a consequence, the church has gone from the front line to the sideline. So millennials is the largest generation in the history of our people who believe in God but don't align themselves with the church because they don't see the church doing the work. Can you imagine, Kurt, Root Magazine, which is our generation's ebony? Root Magazine has their Root 100 every year, 100 most influential black people in our community. For 3 years straight, Root Magazine has not had one pastor on the list. Can you imagine, of the most influential people in our community, and you list not 10, not 20, 100, because people want to know not how well your choir sings or how great you exegete in the text, but how much compassion do you extend to the community? What's the work that you are doing? And so, the older axiom is people don't want to know how much you know. They want to know how much you care. And so the black church has got to live out loud in a way that really demonstrates the grace and the love of Christ.
man, one of the first words I learned, I studied French in Paris, and I was fortunate to live with a French family who spoke very little English, and it was my, trial by fire. But I learned so much, and one of the things I learned was the word pastor. Pastor is like
Uh,
the word shepherd is pastor, and I'm here now hearing you say that we talk about percentages, 100 people and 0% of the ones who are influencing our culture we're shepherds and pastors. So, here's my last question for this segment, that, how in the world do we, even I'm old enough to have kids who were 40 and my kids are from basically, 32 to 42. How do we navigate that bridge, that divide, to have our faith in Christ, unquestioned, but still now having to process these things alongside, hopefully, our kids and not just preaching to them? How in the world do we do it?
yeah, our actions have to speak louder than our words. Most of the times, when Jesus preached, he never quoted or cited a text, but he walked through it in parables. And I think a lot of us have compartmentalized Christianity by how many scriptures you can memorize. And our actions have to speak louder than our words. What does it mean for us to have our young people do community service? Here it is, that's not court ordered. Now, what does it mean for us to be gracious to our elders? What does it mean to mentor? All of those things are things that are variables that come out of a Christian walk. And those are the things that we have to do.
I am here with our special guest. Of course, are our special guest because you're listening, and it's our privilege to be with you. But our special guest is Pastor Jamal Bryant. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. A little podcast called Humans Being, not Humans Doing. We're just going to talk about being today. I'm Kirk Whalum.
Humans Being with Kirk Whalum. R&R on Sports.
We are talking about former NBA basketball player, Brother Mario Ellie. Welcome to R&R on Sports.
Pleasure to be on here with you guys, man. Thank you guys for having me.
It's R&R on Sports.
Welcome back to Humans Being with Kirk Whalum. You're my special guest. I'm so glad you're tuned in. I see you driving that car. You better be careful. I see you kind of aggressive driving that thing, but you're still my guest, so I need you to take care of yourself. But you and I have a very special guest. If you're just tuning in, it's the great, and I say the word great, from the standpoint of, greatness is something that's going to be judged later on, as they say, when there's no time, literally no time. But I think Brother Jamal Bryant is great in his compassion for people, and in that sense, we have a great guest. Brother Jamal Bryant, how are you, sir?
I'm better just because I realize I'm a human being. Thank you.
Don't have to worry about doing, because they say, well, you're gonna go to hell because you don't believe the right thing, or you're not doing this, or you're doing that, and it's like, well, you know what? That's above your pay grade, and mine too. Well, we're just gonna be and try to help each other. But I want to, speaking of that, I want to just mention this particular topic. It's not controversial at all, and that would be LGBTQ rights and just to love people and allow them to be who they are, love who they love. I know you've had to navigate that as a pastor, as a leader and a lover of people. I posted something the other day with that LGBTQ bread, bread loaf where it's all different colors. I said, I'm getting ready to go in on this to make me some toast with avocado. And you'd have thought I had said, I was to mention Hitler or something. But just tell me, how are you doing on that topic, man, in your community?
Yeah, I think I have evolved, Kirk. The Black church is the originator of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That's not really from Clinton, that's from the Black church. Because the LGBTQ community has always been in our churches, whether it's the choir director, the pastor, the deacons, somebody
Yes,
sitting
sir.
in the balcony, but we acted like it didn't exist. And I used to preach strong against it. I was convicted of this maybe about 6 years ago. Um, I'm old school in such that at the end of my services, I go to the back door and I hug my parishioners on their way out. And one Sunday while I was at Empowerment Temple, I hug a young man. And as I do all my members, I said to him, man, love you. Have a great week. He said, Pastor, you don't love me. I said, what you mean I don't love you? He said, I'm gay. And I've heard you preach. You don't love me. And it stopped me in my tracks that I was somewhere between bullying or hetero supremacy. That I
Hold on.
could not.
No, we got to pause. I'm sorry. I need to pause for just one quick second. Hetero supremacy. I need to make sure we document that right there because that was too deep. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that I realized that I was brazen in hypocrisy, that I believed the love of God couldn't reach him being gay, but that the love of God could surround me being divorced, that the love of God could be there with me having a child out of wedlock, and somehow or another that I could dictate where the love of God goes and all the more where it ends. And so that young man helped change and recalibrate for me my thought process and how it is that we move forward, that the church really has to exercise the compassion of Christ,
Mm.
that we are not crossing guards or police officers. We're lifeguards. Amazing thing if you and I, Kirk, go to the Atlantic Ocean, go to the Maldives, go to the YMCA pool, is that if we dive and somehow or another hit our heads on a rock, the lifeguard doesn't ask what is our proclivity. Yes.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, he
Mm.
has nothing. He's just going to try to save me. And I think that that is the responsibility, is that I have the responsibility to stop people from drowning. And let's not forget that the Bible says our self-righteousness is filthy, that we pump ourselves up because our issue, our area does not mirror somebody else's. Then we handpick what is the thing that we can derive.
I'm just, your words are just so, it's the balm is flowing out, for me and for our listeners, born out of your own evolution, and that's the thing that that blesses me because it certainly does describe where I am, my thoughts on this. And again, what is theology? Well, it's your thoughts on God. It's your, how you understand God. Well, my theology has evolved so drastically. And though, of course, growing up, there were LGBTQ folks all around me, and my babysitters were a gay couple. And so, I mean, I literally grew up around folks who were attracted to the same sex, or just again, just however you want that unfolds. But to be able to come to a place where it all begins to line up, and that's not to say I understand anything about God thoroughly, because He's above the sun, I'm underneath it. But man, am I grateful for that word that you mentioned, evolution. And I guess let me. And by the way, I'm grateful for this president by the name of Obama. Also was transparent about how his understanding of this issue had evolved, and he was willing to admit that. There was a book by David Ritz, who I privilege of meeting. I did a little something for him, but the book he wrote about Marvin Gaye is called Divided Soul. Marvin Gaye, Divided Soul. And it's been out for years, but it hit me in a certain way because I found myself my aspirations uh, as a musician, tread dangerously into the area of Kirk glorification and Kirk being able to experience this or experience that. And, that dreaded sort of entitlement thing that we tend to feel. I say we, I'm not putting you in this bunch, but I'm going to say anybody standing before people, for me, I'm standing on a stage and I've got people saying to me, I really like the way you do what you do, and I like the way you look, and I like all things about you. And so I found myself, my soul was divided. Maybe not as drastically as Marvin, where he actually kind of saw himself to be called as a sex symbol, and then he felt it calling to the ministry, right? So, man, I mean, you have to deal with at least the part about being in front of people and knowing that causes people to see you differently. I mean, man, how have you
It
processed
is,
that?
yeah, it is. Marvin Gaye's one of my heroes. What's Going On was released on my birthday. I just
Wow.
turned 50. Yeah, I just turned 50 just 3 weeks ago. And so
Happy
50
birthday,
years
brother.
ago, thank you, is when What's Going On came out. It is, Kirk, the dynamic of living in an era of being Superman, at least in your mind. But here's the problem with being Clark Kent is, Kirk, we now live in an era where there are no phone booths. And because there are no phone booths, you got to stay in your cape. So you're having to always act like you can jump over buildings in a single bound. Isn't it amazing? Superman had all of that power, but still needed glasses. It's amazing that he could do all of that, but still needed a job. Isn't it amazing that he operated with such level of gifting and fell in love with somebody with no gift? So you gotta you gotta find what is my balance. That the reality is I'm not Superman. I'm Clark Kent. I'm at the Daily Planet every day, grinding it out, trying to figure out what it is that I can do. And I think that all of us have to have that sobering reality. The more my stage is elevated, the more, hear this, I understand Lucifer's fall. Can you imagine being, I'm talking to a musician, can you imagine being so musically astute that since you got fired, heaven never hired another minister of music? Can you imagine that you have that level of musical depth to be able to play spirituals and hymns and anthems, long meter, that you do all of that, that you are teaching the whole orchestra how to play on pitch, and you only got to learn 2 words, glory and hallelujah. So his job as a jazz musician is just to have improvisation on 2 words that they got to sing every day, all day. That's a lot. That's a lot of gifting. You got to say, listen, look at me, that I, Kurt, play the kind of music. Here's what's crazy, that God enjoys. I play the kind of sound that makes heaven pay attention. You talking about symphony halls. You talking about jazz festivals, and here he is in a position where God just wants to hear him play. Let him play just for another 1,000 years. And then to have that much influence that he's not just deluded himself, he's deluded part of the band and part of the choir. That they are so allegiant to his gift that they were willing to lose their own position. And so it's not just the danger of what it does to me, but what is the danger of those who drink the Kool-Aid without a straw and really begin to believe I have this false invincibility that is not true, that I am going to let you down. I am going to be tired. There are going to be moments on the road I'm going to be irritable. I'm going to say I'm going to say something that you are not going to agree with. And so the real love is, my father said, when people know who you are and still love you anyway. A lot of people like you, they don't know you to love you.
Oh, geez. Well, so I promised that I was going to get some music in here, and you know, you brought me into a place where I wanted to sit down and digest that for a while, but I can't. I need to keep rolling here. So here's the thing, you know, the way I look at it, music has been a part of every single. You mentioned, for instance, you know, civil rights movement. You know, right now we're in a different space when it comes to Black Lives Matter and just all the peripheral, you know, activity that's going on for the sake of people who are yet in bondage of one kind or another. Music is axiomatic to all of that, right? It's just
Yeah.
now it's not, you know, Negro spirituals. You know, it's a completely different thing. Although I will say, and I'm gonna play this first melody, and I'm gonna see if you recognize it. I know you will. There have been some folks who were providing the soundtrack who were not, you know, in that time what was expected. They were not gospel musicians. It wasn't, you know what I mean, James Cleveland, but some folks like this.
Ain't nobody crying.
Uh huh. Yeah. Uh
No
huh. So the
athletes. I
staple,
know that
this.
the amazing thing is true. Then you go into Thomas Dorsey. Is music, gospel music, always had an overture of rhythm and blues. Our
Yeah.
greatest R&B singers, quite frankly, were church runaways. They all
Mm,
started off in the church, and the church didn't have much space for their gifting. And Kurt, we'd have to do a whole nother show where the only
oh.
absence of that would be hip hop music, because most of our churches didn't have a rap ministry. Didn't have a place for our young men. So imagine Jay-Z saying openly he's never held the Bible. That would have never been said by Teddy Pendergrass. That would have never been said by Lionel Richie. That would have never been said for anybody who came out of Motown,
Right.
because the church was a part of the whole Motown sound. Was
Mm,
gospel music. Think about it. They was coming out with tambourines.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
drum
Yeah.
sets on the stage. So that was all a part of the black church experience. It is so it was easy for church people to be bipolar, hybrid. That we'll leave out of church and turn on the R&B station because it was the
Yeah.
same. It was the same. It was the same tempo, same undertone. Teddy Pendergrass had a song. I forgot the name of it. You would know better than me. Not Teddy, Isaac Hayes, where he talking for like 12 minutes. It's his own sermon. It ain't no song on it. It's just something underneath of it. And he moving forward. You know, the Archbishop of R&B, James Brown, he took the whole thing of the black church. He had an armor bearer bring him a cape, throw it
Mm,
on. That's all stuff out of the church. Them dragging him
yes,
away
sir.
from the mic and him coming back to it. Think of Al Green. All of that is the black church personified. And so
Mm,
that music is amazing. It was only white evangelicals that called R&B devil music. because they didn't understand the sacredness of our sound, that here's what we called it soul music, that it ministered to our souls. So, Kirk, you are able to perform with nobody singing, because the music met us at a place of our soul, that it ministered through the harmony, through what Stevie Wonder calls songs in the key of life, helped us to really find our own vibration. Soul music taught us how to meditate when the church never did. Soul music gave us the pathway of introspection when we get irritable if there's a call for silence in the church. You know, if ain't nobody saying something in church, we think something is wrong. So we wasting time. But
Right.
soul music gave us that landscape to be what secularists would call at one with the universe, getting in touch with our higher selves, finding what is the cosmic dimension of our own reality, of focusing. So people would drive around back then with your CD in the car, with your cassette in the car, thinking through, what am I do now that I got laid off? How am I going to handle this divorce? You know, your
Now that
music
mama
was meant for
died, you know.
people. Your mama died. So, I ain't traveled with you nowhere, but invariably people will come up to you. Your music helped me. How? I didn't say nothing. But you were you were meeting a need at a place through tempo and pace and speed, meeting the upswing of our own lives, even when society was hitting us at the downbeat. You met all of that, and that's what music is. Bob Marley says music is the only thing that don't hurt you when it hits you, and so
My, my.
that's music for us is spiritual, of understanding what that means.
But you touched on something, Pastor, that that is very real for me, and I think it's very real for this epoch that we're in, and that is dualism, like the dualistic way of looking at things. With that's sacred and that is secular, and man, we miss out on so much, right? Not to even get into how much we could have integrated, the outreach of the Holy Spirit through rap music. Not even getting into that, we threw that baby out with the bathwater. But man, I truly believe that God speaks. When it comes to these instruments, I believe that God speaks the language of music. That there's for, in Spanish, se por encima de, like above all that we can communicate, with verbal languages. God can use music in such a way that's so much more profound because it doesn't involve your cognitive center at all. I mean, I have the curse, the average musician like me who's, sort of musician from birth, you're going to hear those melodies and you're sort of charting it in your head. Well, I know that's the 5 and that's the 3 and the 2 and whatever. So that aside, God is able to communicate something of meaning, of depth, of importance through just go straight into your heart, and I think it's a high calling. It's something that we miss because we're so in tune to the lyric, because we're approaching it from left brain. But if we turn that off and we say, wait a minute, let me allow this to get inside me, man, Jamal, I believe that a musician, especially instrumental, is able to break and enter into a person's soul. Like, I can get in there. You can't keep me out. There's no security system that can keep me out of there. Like, I truly believe that is a way that God can use us to just completely get around all of that and get in people's hearts.
You have to look at Psalm 150. Psalm 150 gives us the command. Here's what's crazy. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord. Psalm 150 is an outline of how to praise God with the string instruments, with the high sounding organ, and with the wind instruments. Here's what's crazy, Kirk, as he says, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. Then names for the whole chapter instruments and never calls for altos, never calls for tenors, never calls for the sopranos. He's saying my praise is through that instrument. And we have to understand that we are the instruments of God. Is that God is looking to play us, that when he breathes into us, as he did in Genesis chapter 3, he's playing the instrument. I have no hands but his hands. I have no feet but his feet. What sound are you making in your life? I don't mean in singing, but is your life a dog whistle where it only calls and pulls out the darker side of people? Or is your life in the right pitch that people are attracted to being in your presence? Do people have to take a deep breath when they see your name on their phone before they answer? It's about what is that sound or what is the vibration that you are releasing that other people want to
Now
connect. And so
you mentioned vibration and sound, and by the way, they're giving me the rap sign. When the vibration and the sound, I'm gonna talk to you for 2 hours, but the vibration and the sound of your life, it can even resonate with creation, with nature. You know, that's another something that we kind of threw out with the bathwater. In the last dispensation, when we missed all of that, we go, well, who's up next? We got to watch them do the Jesus show, and then we watch them do the Jesus show, and yours Jesus show was better than his, and you know, God is like, I want you to be quiet, and I want you to just let those instruments bring you to a space where you can be in harmony with me vertically and with nature horizontally. I gotta let you go. I'm already probably over the cliff on this podcast. I am so very, very grateful. I'm going to ask you if you would, you know, allow me to even ask you to do it again at some point.
no,
You're the busiest guy I know.
no. I would be honored. I'm appreciative just to be in the same cyber room as you. So anytime, call me back. I'm glad to be a part.
Okay, yeah, because there's so much more I want to get to with you. And if you allow me to, I'm going to bug everybody in your team. God bless you. Thank you so much, Jamal Bryant, pastor, friend of the people. And you've been tuned to Humans Being with Kirk Whalum, our
Humans
special
Being
guest,
with Kirk
Jamal
Whalum.
Bryant. God bless you.